All right, everybody. I think we're loading people into the lobby now. Welcome to the Route Consultant Weekly webinar. For those of you who are here for the first time, my name is Josh Gregory. I am the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. If you're not familiar with us or who Route Consultant is, we ran hundreds of routes across the country in both P&D and line haul. And today, really, we're here for two main reasons. One, we want to help buyers who are looking and trying to figure out if this is the right space for them and understand what P&D is, what line haul is, and how to be successful. And also for current contractors, we want this to continue to be a place where, as crazy things happen in this industry, we can come together, talk about it, talk about things that we've seen worked and things that we've seen that haven't worked, and then find time to ask questions and really come together and find the best solutions. So before we go too much farther, just a quick disclaimer to read, as I do every week. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. So for everybody who is here for the first time or here every week, welcome back. Like I said, we always want this to be a place where you can come ask questions and learn. And so just the format of today, if you've never been to one of these, we're going to go over some content, some things that we want to highlight and talk through today, and then go over some of the new events and new listings that have come out this week. And then at the end, we will have a pure Q&A. So anytime while I'm talking today, while we're going through the content, you can go ahead as you're thinking of questions, type that into the little Q&A button at the bottom of the window. If you put it in the chat, I'm going to miss it. But if you put it in that Q&A, it can be about what we talk about today, or it can be any questions you have about the FedEx space as a whole. And we'll try to answer them, and we'll be here till the top till 4:30 to answer all those questions for everybody that comes through. So for today, one of the big things that it's always good to think about and talk through at the beginning of the year as you're bringing on new people, as you're trying to reform your operations and really think through areas of improvement, one of the most important things to think through is your training. And really what we wanted to hone in on today is coming back to talking through qualification certification, the training program for P&D. And it is something that has been around for a few years now, but because of that, I'd say that there are some gaps and some challenges that have arisen in terms of the ways that people have kind of gotten used to what they're able to get by. And so whether you're new, whether you're hiring, or whether you're about to come into the space for the first time, there's a lot of things that we want to make sure you understand about this program and training really in general. So Amy and Dave, I see you there. Let's go ahead and jump in and start talking about it.
Hey, sure. I'm Dave Byers. I'm the AO Slicker Trucking
Yeah.
and handle a lot of the boots on the ground type stuff in the terminals.
Yep. And I'm Amy Byers. I handle a lot of the back office, financials, people stuff. And the interesting thing about Dave and I is all the AO tasks seem to have a kind of human, financial, and operational side and a boots on the ground side, whether that's trucks and then financing or hiring and then training, and then all of the service. I mean, all of it. So Dave and I work really closely together to manage all of our divisions, P&D that has express 7-day operations, line haul, which is day city work, as well as local line haul, and as well as our custom critical. So we're pretty busy, but 19 years almost now, and still challenges every day.
Yep. And we're going to talk about some of them today.
And that is one of them today, for sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mentioned it that a big part of training is this kind of program qualification certification. Can you just start by kind of giving a little bit of an overview of what that program is?
Yeah, so when we first started doing training, really like kind of honed in training where it was like formal, it was back in the day when you wanted to bring on someone with zero experience. And FedEx had a 1 year, a 1 and 3 and a 3 and 5 kind of requirement for drivers. They allowed you to do an L10 program or an L20 program, which was the 10,000 pound truck, which required a certain level of training, and then a truck over 10,000 pounds, which required another level of training. And then they even had an L30, which was kind of like your straight truck. So Those training programs were in place. And then in 2021-ish, they announced that we're going to mandate this qualified certification training program, and that it was going to cost everybody a bunch of money. And that was a huge, thing to overcome, and that you needed to get certified. You could only get this training through someone that had been trained by someone that was even more trained than them. So you had to have these people called CTs, which were certified trainers, and then they had to get trained. So that was huge, right? And then you had a timeline. Every contract at the time. So in 2021, we had until June of 2022, kind of hard date to get our first contract on board. And then anybody after that time had to follow these same guidelines. And it just was what it was. So different contracts for existing drivers had different qualifications, but anybody new after June, I think 4th, 2022, had to go through this training. So for us, that was quite a big feat. And then now today, which the qualified program includes an in-class portion and then an in-truck portion, both unladen and laden. And then there's some other things that we'll get into the details of kind of what those training days look like for an existing driver. Anybody that has been with FedEx before, it's just 1 day in the truck or 1 day in class. And then for somebody that's new, it's a full day class and then some maneuverability, 2 days or 8 hours over 2 days for unladen in the truck, and then 2 days en route in a live route situation, which can actually be done by a qualified observer. It doesn't have to be a certified trainer. That can actually just be somebody that has a year with FedEx with no DOT accidents. So to kind of go over real quick what those levels are. So there's an LT, which is a lead trainer. That is someone who can train trainers. And then you have a CT, which is a certified trainer, and that's kind of what you want to have on your staff. We have an LT. Our GM is an LT, so he actually can train our trainers as well as other contractors, trainers. So then your CTs are the ones that are able to perform the class and do kind of these unladen. They can do the road tests and they can do unladen training. So your first portion of your new hires. And then the qualified observers, like I said, can be anyone in your organization that has an active badge for a year and no DOT accidents. And then your drivers get qualified certified car qualification certifications. So they're kind of the driver level. So there's those 3 levels. So your drivers, your CT, and your LTs. And then now there's a new thing that the qualified training is only good for 2 years. So once you get your drivers through, so now is that time, anyone that was kind of in the system prior. So ours all started to expire in June of 2024, and we're still working through our recertifications now. And again, that's just a 1 day class, and that's kind of a refresher, but still a commitment. And then again, those new people, they come in, that's still only good for 2 years. While they did extend the CT certifications for 3 years going forward. So that was kind of a nice thing, because that's a little bit more costly to become a CT. There's actually a hard cost with your training vendor, whereas the cost on your regular training for your drivers is just your internal costs, right?
Okay, so that's the overview, that's the program, but like Dave,
Yes.
actually, what does it look like when you're actually kind of managing and leading one of these programs?
So it was, I think, 2.5 years ago, and we had 150 employees. So just kind of go back to when we got it started. So we were kind of looking this dead square in the face and saying, we got to get 150 employees through this training. How do we do it? How are we going to do it? Where do we even start? So we had to manage getting the drivers off the routes, getting route coverage for them, and then we had to, on top of it, we had to send management to get trained to be the certified trainers, which some of it wasn't even local to us. And then we decided that we wanted to do a lead trainer, which what better person than the highest in command, which was our general manager. So we made him a lead trainer, which also gave us a little benefit to have the certified training classes closer to home for us. So that worked. And we also got to train some other people. We could network with our other terminals and say, hey, we're going to do these classes. Are you interested in that? And the good thing about our lead trainer was he had a background in safety for us. He held a safety manager role. So he already had like a little bit of groundwork laid on what a safe day-to-day operation looked like. So with that kind of laying in the back, it kind of really helped groom him into this. And then there wasn't really a money benefit to it, but it did save us on the travel and time when we did our certified trainers, because we didn't have to send them to different cities or fly them to Charlotte, North Carolina from Ohio to do training. So that worked out really well with it. And then as we started to develop our own, as we went through the certified training classes, we realized we could incorporate some of our own values from the slicker side. So we could kind of add to the class, and you have the time in there that you could kind of teach what you want to teach. So we covered a lot of our slicker values and just operational
a lot
things.
of best practices as far as the delivery side. So not just the driving side that's required in this training program, but best practices as far as front doors and when there's dogs and, all the little things that go along. We kind of have, you have this captured audience mandated to be in this room, right? You might as well talk a little bit about not only that, but just culture and expectation. Especially for some drivers that may have had past experience breaking old habits. It's a great audience to say, like, listen, I appreciate that you come with a wealth of experience from FedEx, but this is how we do it here at Slicker.
Yeah.
So it kind of gave us an opportunity.
We groomed it into a full 1-day class at our office. So we have the drivers here, and it's still like that now. We bring in new hires. We do the recertifications here. And it actually gives us a day to spend with the drivers, even though Amy and I aren't in the classes. They come here to the office and we get to interact with them, ask them about, about their families, how they are, what they need. They come here. Hey, I could use a new uniform. Like we could kind of, it's like a touch base with every one of your drivers. And it's nice to see them and kind of get them out of the warehouse setting for a day. And then, so that we do that on one day, and then we do, there's also the unladen days for new hires. So after we spend a day with new hires, we do the 2 days unladen. Then we give the road test, and then we can get them in the warehouse and get them with the on route trainings.
And sometimes if it affords, depending on when the class is, we really like to get our trainees into a truck with someone prior to the class. So we call it familiarization training. So we get them in and just kind of a day in the life, right? Like, so when I say your scanner or your iPad, or, when the proximity, or you start using these terms, they kind of have this, oh, I remember what that looked like, instead of, imagine, if you will, this big square thing that looks like an iPad in front of you. They really do get, and they get an idea for how the boxes are on the shelves. They get an idea for, what the labeling system looks like. So it's a nice, and they see the driver, right? They're observing, they see the driver using the technology, using these swoop techniques, maybe how to back into an apron of a driveway, or, maybe a sticky situation. They can, have some conversations about, being in the truck and things like that. So we do like that 1 day before class. You just have to make sure that, they're E-Verify and all that stuff to get them badged as appropriate. We don't let them obviously on site until the background check and the drug screen comes in. Why you're not going to pay people until they're qualified, but you can get them on to the terminal before the class. And we found that works really well. So they kind of spend a minute at the terminal and then they come in with us and go through that full, kind of onboarding more than just training. It's really kind of more of a formal onboarding process.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge thing that you guys mentioned in a couple of points, is that there is the standard formal training that you added to. And I think some of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit later, I know, is that there are some people who are, it's no fault of their own. Their focus as business owners on trying to get drivers in the trucks as fast as possible. And they're in some ways, skirting through or even not quite doing all of the minimum And so this is a very different kind of important focus on strategy and safety and culture more
Yeah.
than just the formal. And I know we'll talk about more, but I think that's an important point to hit on early, is that is it's kind of colored everything you did here.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things you mentioned that you guys have your own certified trainers. Is that something that you've seen everyone do? Like, is that what you'd say is the best way to do it now?
So no, we don't see everyone do it that way. We
Yeah.
actually do certified training. We do existing training and new hire training at our facility for other contractors in the area that don't have CTs. But my particular opinion, we have 4 different terminals, and we make sure that there is at least one certified trainer in all the terminals. And then our senior managers are also certified. So I think we have 9 right now, 9 CTs and 1 LT. So we have that lead trainer. And I know people are like, well, of course you can just train all the people you want. It's not that case. Our price is still $2,500 or $2,700 per person at Ground Cloud. We do get the benefit of them being here at the office, but as far as that's concerned, we still have to write that, almost $20,000 check every time it comes up. And it's not cheap, but there's a lot of reasons, right? You can have the training, you can get through the training very quickly because you have the certified people on staff. You can guarantee that you're doing it correctly, so compliance, all your checks and balances, and it's pretty tough to run a program based on safety if you yourself or someone in your company doesn't know exactly what the CT program is about. So you can take it from me and say, okay, are you certified, and check the box that I put your person through training. But do you know, when you go back for remediation training or when someone has an accident, do you know what they learned? How do you retrain? How do you hold people accountable if you don't know yourself what the bare minimum expectations are and what that content that they were supposed to learn, right? So you're like, okay, the guy got an 85 on the test. Like, okay, so you're probably 85% safe. Probably pretty representative of your safety score. So it's important to us that we have that coverage and that we can move people through the program pretty quickly, because again, it's not cheap, right? So the longer you prolong that day to first in truck and then on a baby route and on, making sure that they're learning as they go, the longer that drags out, that's more money, because you're just basically paying an overpaid jumper. At that point, you're paying a jumper a driver's rate. And to be fair, that's not the position that that new candidate signed up for. They don't want to be a helper. They came to you because they want to be a driver on their own route. So you could also be kind of, hurting yourself and appearing maybe even a little bit disorganized if, everything is not, signed off on and by a CT. So we feel it's super important. We also like that all of our people in different terminals are CTs because they're all doing it the same way.
Yeah.
So from a consistency standpoint and a policy standpoint, when Dave and I hold people accountable and run the business based on policy and rules, it's not, well, this terminal does it this way and this terminal does it a different way. All of our terminals are managed. All of our managers and our CTs are held to the same expectations about how road tests are done. So everything's very consistent. So it's much easier to manage in the long run.
When you have your own CT, you develop a relationship in the class right from the start too. So when they get to the station level, they have a reference point, right? They can ask questions. They're comfortable with that teacher because they know like that they have the answers or the guidance point. And when we have 9 of them, we can say like, hey, this is another CT, and it just makes like comfortable. So if we're training for another contractor, they don't have that kind of that point of contact that we've kind of developed with our operation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's a whole kind of structure that you've put in around onboarding and training. I know we've talked a little bit about how it can be a little bit expensive to put some of these stuff, but what's been the other kind of positive benefits on the business once you've added these things to your program?
So we get quite a bit complimented on the formal onboarding process. So new hires come to us and they're like, wow, you have a folder and you have a welcome packet and you have a training guide and we went to a class and we all sat here and you brought in lunch. And then, then our uniform room is downstairs. They go to the uniform room and if we don't have it in stock, they place an order. So it's a very formal onboarding process. And it's kind of like the big old slicker hug, right? When you come in, and that's what you want from your first experience. You don't want them to go to the dock and they're in jeans and a t-shirt and everything's chaotic and the managers are putting out fires because there's 5 call-offs. And, so it's just a nice kind of calm approach. And not that that doesn't happen to us. I probably explained that would look like yesterday at our own business. So I'm not saying we're immune to it, but the idea of them coming here, it's just a really refreshing kind of calm setting. And our terminal is an hour and a half from one of our further terminals, and they replicate this at one of the local hotels. They've built a relationship and there's a boardroom. So everything's very much the same. It's just not here. So it doesn't have to be, well, I don't have an office, so it's not going to work like that. There's ways to stay consistent and to manage a formal onboarding process. Those managers, they're on workforce documents together for payroll, like everything is just very formal. So this process has kind of done that. And I liken it, we're not drinking from the customer Kool-Aid, right? I'm not, but the guidelines are set forth by our customer, and we've refined them specific to our business. So really, this embracing this kind of structure has really helped us create our own structure. Outlined for that, our safety is much better. The training process obviously is much longer, but we find that people are, once they're through training, their independence to more of a solid, stable driver, that time is a little bit shortened. It works hand in hand with our vetter coaching. So it's nice when we can understand the CT program, because when we go into coach, I argue quite a bit with our vendor that when they say backing on the roadway, I'm like, they're not backing on the roadway. They're backing into an apron of a driveway, which is taught to them in class. So then we get all the points removed and we have deep conversations with them, and they change the way they do things. So it's important that, you're coaching people based on what they're learning. So again, that's, it's all tied hand in hand. So it's all better. It's not cheap. And to do things, I always say, it's not cheap to do things the right way, to be compliant, to always check the boxes. But over time, it does end up streamlining things and making you a much safer and a much more organized environment. And I think that our managers appreciate the structure. It also kind of serves for us, and this is a hard one these days as far as terminating employees. If someone doesn't pass a road test, that's a good hard out, right? Like, I'm sorry, you're not qualified. You didn't pass the road test. And then, it's kind of a legitimate, you're not eligible. So the CT program and even the test, the formal written test, we've seen people that are kind of dozing off in class or texting during class. And if they're under a 75%, that's in our handbook that you have to get a 75% or higher to move on to the next step. So if you're sleeping in class and you didn't pass the test, that kind of shows me if you're showing up day one and you're already sleeping, might not be the right fit for us here at Slicker. So with that structure, it's given us some benchmarks along the way that we really never had before. So it's kind of a good, again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things you can talk about. Sure, there's costs for doing it right, but you can look at the benefits, and some of these benefits, safety is never a trivialized benefit. Like that is your contract health is keeping safety a priority. Yeah. And keeping your safety scores high. So I think one of the things, people hear, they're like, oh, it's hard. There's, I have to add extra steps. I have to build a program. But I think one of the things that is most important is the kind of the other side of this conversation. Yes, there's a cost to have a good program, but what's the cost of having a poor program or trying to not handle this properly and do it as quickly as possible? What have we seen there?
Yeah.
Accidents, right off the rip. If you're not teaching the class and you're not doing things right, you're going to have more accidents. When you have more accidents, your schedule L goes up. Your schedule L has a 3-year look back. So that's something that it's not a temporary issue for shortcutting through
training.
through the training. So you have to take a look at that. You also run into all the other issues, the service failures on your packages, the miscoding of packages, the not knowing how to use service crosses, and just not being comfortable in a truck altogether, the whole day-to-day operation.
Yeah. And again, that CT training, the formality of that CT training has allowed us to become more formal with our other training, right? Because you can say, oh, the CT training is just about safety and backing and rules of the road and the differences between a professional driver and a private driver, a consumer driver. But really, it gives us an opportunity to put that formality and that structure into our customer training, right? Like our regular job skill training, which is what's a proper PPOD? Like, what does that picture proof of delivery look like? And why do you have to take a picture of this without the door handle, without the person in it, with the, with the label, but not all too much, right? All the different things that you can talk about. And, what do you do when there's a dog and all those different things that you can train on. I would also say that one of the benefits, or I guess things that could hurt you financially, is not having a solid training program and sending someone out to do a route and they feel just unprepared. And we've heard this from other, drivers that come to us, even in different industries. I started this new job and I just feel like I'm figuring it out. So you've already paid for the Indeed ad, right? You've already put all the work into First Advantage, gone through all that. You've worked out the road test. You've worked out everything. The person's been probably with you a week or two by now, and now they feel abandoned, right? So with that, they're clearly not prepared to do the job. So their service, safety, probably everything sucks. And then they are kind of not feeling great about this new opportunity. They didn't get that big hug, right? They don't feel like they know where they can go for more training. We do a check-in, a 1-week check-in, where the driver actually fills out a form and says, yes, I feel competent to do this, this, and this after 1 week. Because if I get a document back that says that they haven't done that, I go immediately to my trainers and say, like, what's the deal? What happened? And they're like, well, so-and-so got sick. We kind of used him as a jumper. And then we know what's going to happen, right? We know exactly what that outcome can look like when we take our trainers and turn them into jumpers. It's just super frustrating. From there, like Dave said, service obviously is a huge one. And then morale is a huge cost of not training people correctly. You finally, if you have a hole in or a gap in your staffing, you finally get these people in and your coworkers are going, oh my gosh, thank goodness they finally got somebody. And then the person is just not pulling their weight. And they're like, great, that person, and then you get that they suck. I'm like, no, they don't suck. They weren't trained right. No, the people don't suck. I mean, there are people that suck, but they don't suck. So, but I think the morale is a huge thing for us. So I think, and morale on the other side is just giving, I think Dave and I will talk about, giving your strong drivers that CT class is also a huge morale builder for them. You're investing $2,700 or $2,500 into this training. They've become certified. They become more valuable. Maybe you give them a little bonus every time they train somebody, or whatever, an added, whatever that looks like for you, as far as or you just pay them more because they are certified. But it's a value. They see themselves as someone that can offer a little bit more. So it's a little bit more of a career path. So the morale has a lot to do with the program, and the costs of, you can see the cost of doing it right and the cost of doing it wrong. It can definitely be costly in that regard. I think another cost of doing it wrong is falsifying training or falsifying documents. We had specifically a kid who hit a girl. He went right through a stop sign, totally his fault. The girl was no one was injured, but she did, file and press charges and all the things. And they asked me for his training, certifications, his logs, what our process was. And I provided all of it. And literally through Ground Cloud, I pulled his name and I had a history from 2020 to 2024 of every training program, every weekly ongoing class that he had through the iPad. Any additional, we had our content, we had everything locked and loaded, right? And we were able to send it to him, and they actually dropped the suit and just ended up with the obviously the damage claim with the truck and everything. But I couldn't imagine going through that and not having it, or having it then be escalated a little bit more and find out that the road test was pencil whipped, or that the person didn't even know what a class was, but yet there's a class and a test and a road test, and the person that's driving for you is like, I don't even know what that class looks like. And I know that sounds far-fetched, but it's not. We get people all the time that have, it says right there in First Advantage that they have a training document, and the person says, never been through a class in my entire life, don't know what you're talking about. So there's some risks to not doing it correctly. And I'm, for one, I'm not gonna put that just quick little, I mean, I need people in a truck just as bad as anybody else does, but I'm not willing to put the other 199 people at risk and their families, because it's going to expedite the person a week. It's just not worth it to us, I don't think.
No.
For that purpose, or not training them correctly and hurting someone. I mean, I always tell people, and they're like, why do you have to be so morbid? Why do you have to be so, Debbie Downer? And I'm like, but I want you to see the reality that if you hit that mailbox and they said, well, I didn't see it. I'm like, well, you also didn't see that it was a 5-year-old kid on a bike.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, no. I'm like, no. You told me you didn't see it. So you didn't see that it was a mailbox. You didn't see that it was a tree or a rock. You also didn't see that it was a kid. And you have to drive with that type of caution. And unfortunately, we have these conversations of, well, we don't pay drivers well enough to be that careful. Well, you might need to. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned it just there, where you've got, and it was great in the beginning. You trained all your drivers. You knew that everybody that you had on staff had gone through all the training and had gone through all the right checklists. You knew that they had learned what they needed to learn. But now, as you're, inevitably, you're going to hire a driver that was trained by somebody else's CT, or, if you're new coming into this space and you get a whole company full of drivers that you don't know how they were trained. Is there anything that you all do, or that you can think through of ways to spot check or find out if that training was actually good? Not assuming the worst of anybody else who does the training, but like, what
Right.
can you do? Yeah.
Well, I'll take the on-road side, and then Amy can hit on the behind the scenes.
Yeah.
If we have a driver apply for us that works for another contractor or worked for another contractor, we will issue a road test before we onboard them. We give a road test. Like, we want to know the skill set. We want to know how comfortable they are in a truck, and we want to make sure that it's a good fit for us. We're not just taking somebody that
Internal road test.
Yeah, that's an internal road test. We don't have to turn that into anybody, but we do it. We also do a drug test, and we issue a drug test before they come over to us. And then on the back end with the ground cloud and stuff.
Yeah. So we also do not just throw them because they're active at FedEx. It would be very easy just to throw them in a P1000 and set them free. Again, we throw them with one of our lead drivers, our CTs, and make sure, even if they drive, or sometimes they'll observe if they're not from a contractor that had a ground cloud, or maybe they were on a route where they knew the same route over and over. We make sure they get a day in the seat where our guy can talk to them, and you'd be surprised what you can cover in 6 to 8 hours in a truck with someone, right? You can talk about benefits. You can talk about, it's kind of like, again, that warm, fuzzy hug that you get, this is all about Slicker. This is how long I've worked here. This is what we do. This is the importance of the signature. Come on out with me. I'm going to go with you, and we're going to do the signature together. I don't know how many times I've heard from existing drivers, oh, I got 10 years experience, and they're still on their cell phones and not wearing their seatbelts. I'm like, what better brand did they have? Because I know what my alerts look like, so I can't imagine. So it just gives us an opportunity to say, like, hey man, I know we're not easy. But we're not easy for a reason, because I know that my contract is going to be here in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years. Like, it's security. So I know that these things might seem a little ticky-tacky, but it's important. So from that standpoint, we make sure that they're good on the ground cloud the way we want it done. They're good on the scanner as far as integrity. And then gives them an opportunity to ask questions. We immediately, with a new person, especially that's an existing driver, we immediately follow RIDE. We immediately follow PPOD. We're immediately poking in at ground cloud, just their routing, and just to make sure that they are in fact the senior level that they claim to be. We also do a step up in pay. So when you come on, you don't necessarily come over at the rate that you are at, but I will guarantee that if you meet the expectations that we talked about, I will get you there. And then with all the benefits and everything. But a lot of times people will say, well, I've been here 12 years, I deserve this. And I'm like, you do, and you will, but I don't know you and you don't know me. So we got to meet in the middle. So from from that standpoint, I also can't bring someone in with 12 years and think that they're going to make what one of my senior guys were, like, it's just they have to earn it. So there's a soft side of it and like the hard, right, like the black and white side of it, which is the road test. And then if we start seeing that immediately they don't know best practices, we'll actually put them back through the class.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, well, like we have a class usually every Thursday, with all the different contracts that we have. We're always training someone, or recerting. So we always just have a set class kind of on the Thursdays, and sometimes we don't fill them, sometimes we do. But there's always something. So if somebody's like, oh, they're not really getting, what we're doing, or they're, speeding in the, whatever that looks like, they might need to go through that class again. So we'll put them back through. It's just an investment in ourselves, investment in the person. So it just makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah. I think it's nice to, or smart at least, to use the same standards and apply it even to people who come in with 10 years. I think it's very easy, like you said earlier, to just hope and assume that anybody who's got experience in FedEx is going to be able to do it for you too. But there are just a wide variety of experiences and training that you'll see from different contractors. So it's just as smart as training a new person is
Yeah.
making anybody who comes in can hit the same benchmarks. It doesn't, and if they pass the road test, great. Like, if you've done a couple of things and it's just a quick way to verify that they're as good as they say they are, as opposed to just trusting them and then finding out that they aren't as good as they say they are when they get
Right.
an accident a week later.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And like Dave said earlier, that's not just oh, I have to pay for an accident. That has huge contractual implications. And it's not just for this year, it could be for 3 years with the way some of these programs work. So safety can't be an afterthought or we'll figure it out later, because later could be too late.
Yeah. And to make sure that, from a morale standpoint, that your team is on board, your senior or lead drivers, your BCs, understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? So that they understand what it takes to get someone in that's going to be sustainable and really end up helping the team. Because, I came from the lottery, I came from, corporate America. So training was different, right? Like that spreadsheet that was due on Thursday can wait until Thursday or even next week when the new trainee gets in and gets their feet wet and then can figure out what that spreadsheet should look like. But FedEx doesn't give you any grace on the boxes. They're not going to be like, oh, sorry, Amy, Joe wasn't ready to train today, so just deliver those boxes on Monday, right? There's no grace. So you have to get, that's the one time where you have to do training in cadence with service. That workload is not going to wait for that person to be trained correctly. So I understand the pressure that comes with that when you're like, oh, just put him in a route. And if he can do 40, perfect, right? But he's just not ready, and the risks of that. And not only the risks of doing that, but the risks of sliding, right? Allowing yourself to slide into maybe a less strict schedule. And it's just like, okay, well, you slide a little bit today and then you slide a little bit more tomorrow. And now all of a sudden you're pencil whipping road tests and, falsifying documents and not doing the third day of training or whatever that looks like. It's just not the best way to end up to have a culture of safety. And you're going to have employees that'll respect you for having those standards. But you have to say, like, hey, I got this great guy, he's starting, but it's going to be 6 days, right? 6 days at least. And then it's going to be another, 2 weeks until he's independent at best, right? And what I mean by independent, so we always say that it used to be 3 weeks that we could kind of get through somebody. Now it's like 5 to 6 weeks before they're independent. And what I mean by that is profitable, right? Where I don't have to send anyone else from a different route to help them halfway through the day. I don't have to send a manager. I don't have to cut the route and make it smaller. I don't have to worry about PPOD. I don't have to worry about, like, they are doing everything they're supposed to be doing on a manageable route for a standard driver at 6 weeks. That's what I mean by independent. So it's not just, can they go out on a route and not hit stuff, right? So those are some of the things that we measure, but we measure that along the way. And that's what our senior managers and our BCs are watching, so that if there are points of mitigation or remediation training along the way, we do it before they're independent, before we have 6 weeks in and go, oh my God, did anybody know that this guy does this? Like, what? Right? And it's a surprise to you that, he's run into somebody's living room.
Yeah.
So those are just some of the things that, just kind of overall safety program. But I'm the first one that would love to just be like, oh, there's a route sitting and there's a person that's active. Just do it. And you have to be able to say it's not the right time. So the manager has to get in the truck and give the guy an extra little bit more training. But you can double up and move that ball forward, right? If your manager has to do the route, then have them ride along, right? Do the route with somebody that needs a little bit extra help. Like, don't just say, well, I'm going to take the route and have the manager go in a truck by himself. Move that ball forward. Try to get it over the goal line. So try to, smarter, not harder in that regard.
Yeah, I think this is just, it's something that is like, we cannot overemphasize the importance of these things. And it is, we know that in this, in this market, in today's world, like, it is easy to focus on short-term profitability and operations. But if you let that vision of, your overall health of your contract and like how safety can change over time and the potential threats you run into, like, those are, it's often that I'm having these conversations with people trying to help them out of these situations, when it just spending some time on the front end to make sure that they have the right processes and outcomes set up there would have saved them years of pain. Even though on that week, it might have helped their bottom line, maybe even that month or even that year. But 5 years later, you can look back and see the path that happened, and you're trying to claw your way out. It's really difficult once you've gotten to that point. So we're here to talk through and help kind of let Amy and Dave show what they've done and the things that they do. And I would say that, this is a program, like, you could follow it, but being consistent and continuing to emphasize all of these things every day, that's hard. And that's doing those simple things every day is one of the hardest things about small businesses. Ultimately it's on you as the owner to make sure that your culture and your processes are maintained across the business, and that the people you bring in are also working to maintain that same culture. So that's kind of what we wanted to talk through today. I think, we're already short on question time. So I'll stop talking too. But
And I think, Josh, real quick, though, the one thing I would say is, to your point, whether you have an existing CSA, you've been doing this for years, like Dave and I have, or whether you're buying a CSA, I think having that CT, ask those questions. Does the existing operation have a CT? And if they do, it's such a value. And then, because not only does it help you move forward that you have somebody certified on staff, but it says a lot about their culture. It says a lot about kind of the overall, like what you're buying, or what you're getting into, or even what you're building as a new contractor or a new ISP. What does that look like? What do you want to build it into, and make that small investment in that CT program? My gosh, $3,000 or $2,500 plus travel, like that should be the first thing you do. Week one is get that yourself, or have your BC get it, whatever that looks like, so that you can understand what your customer is expecting of you.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna run through the new listings for this week, and then anybody who has questions, I see a couple in the chat already. This is your chance to type it in while I'm reading through these listings, and we will get to it in just a second. So we have 1 new line haul and 7 new P&D listings this week. So the first line haul is out of Connecticut. It's 9 line haul runs at 1.8 million, 13 employees, 12 trucks, a manager, dedicated runs, and some unassigns as well. And spare tractors. So if you're looking at line haul, that's one out of Connecticut. You can reach out to us on this or any of the others that we'll talk about to go through and get all the financials, get all the details, and answer any questions you have there. On the P&D side, first one we have is out of Indiana. It's 5 routes at $450,000. This is a smaller size business, 5 employees, 8 trucks. And so this is one, it's really low price, profitable entry into the space, but it's one that you might have to manage a little more closely than some of the other businesses you'll see. Virginia, we've got 10 routes at $800,000. This is 11 employees, 10 trucks, and a manager. Really low mileage operation out of Virginia. We have another one out of Virginia that is 11 employees, 10 trucks, and a manager, and it's also at $800,000. So there's 2 in Virginia at $800,000. And then another one in Virginia that is 11 routes at $860,000. So a set of routes in Virginia that you can look at different points, different sizes, and see which one's the right fit for you. Then we've got a couple out of Wisconsin. So first one is 24 routes at 1.4 million, larger size operation, 29 employees, 31 trucks, and 2 managers. And then the next one is 19 routes at 1.4 million, 20 employees, 16 trucks, and a manager. So 2 different Wisconsin territories, if you're in that neck of the woods, that you can look at, larger operations to kind of come in at a larger size there. And the last one we have is out of Oklahoma. It's 12 routes at 885,000. This is 15 employees, 16 trucks, and a manager. Again, this one is a good sized business out of Oklahoma. So Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Virginia, Indiana, and Connecticut are your ones for this year, or for this week. And one other reminder, we do have a happy hour coming up in at the end of February 25th in San Jose. It was LA. Obviously, there's reasons why we can't have it in LA anymore. So we're now in San Jose. And we're actually having Tim Goff, if you're familiar with him, on the line haul side, My Ground Force, speak at that event. So if you're coming out, you can kind of learn about some of the things going on in the line haul space if you're going to be out in San Jose, West Coast, in a few weeks. And it is free to attend, free drinks, free food, and we'll have our team out there as well. So if you're in that neck of the woods, make sure you come out and see us. And then, okay, so I do see we have a question here. If anybody else has questions, type it in. But David's here asking, so if you've got somebody who comes in and they don't have any experience in larger vehicles, over 10,000 pounds, how do you train them to drive it? And is it any different to try to teach somebody in a larger vehicle if they have no experience doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll train them to drive it.
Yeah.
What we do is a lot of times we have a step-up program where we start them in a smaller size vehicle so that they're comfortable. They learn the delivery process in the smaller vehicle. And then we'll have a step-up program where they go from the smaller vehicle to the next bigger size. And we can work them up into the full-size step vans until they're comfortable with it. Because the last thing you want to do is throw someone that's not comfortable in a over 10K truck and put them out on the road. So we kind of go at their rate. We have some drivers that do it pretty quick. We have some drivers that not as quick.
Yeah. And when we do road tests, we actually we talk about the experience that the driver has. So even someone that has experience, they can say, oh yeah, I used to drive a a dump truck for my dad, whatever, right? And you're like, okay, well, I'm going to start you in a P1000. If they can't pass in a P1000 tail whip, whatever that looks like in the cones and the serpentine and the maneuverability, we'll actually move them down into a box truck. And then, if they're good in like a 12-foot box truck or a 14, maybe we move them back into a 16. And then later on, they usually come to us or we'll ask them, like, do you feel comfortable in this? Or we're going to start you here. And then we'll let you go for maybe 6 months and we'll revisit it and say, are you ready to, as other routes open up, if there's a specific need on our team. We're very fortunate to have in almost all of our terminals a hybrid of trucks. We don't have that 10 P1000 contract. All of our routes are kind of hybrid. So we have some Nissans, we have some 12, 14, 16 footers, and we have P700s, P1000s, P1200s, and even straight trucks. So we're fortunate that we have this like fluidity to move people up and down. If somebody fails a road test in a box truck, we're like, all right, into the cargo van, and we'll see if we can salvage that driver and that investment. So same thing with like a driver that comes in from Spark or DoorDash, where they're only driving their personal car. We will start them in a cargo van or a small box truck. And if they do well, our managers, even on site, will say, hey man, I got a P1000. While you're here and the cones are set up, let's try this. And they'll put them in a P1000 and just see how they do. It doesn't cancel out the positive, the past test in the 14-foot cutaway, but it does give us an idea of their natural ability. And if they can do it 3 times in a row, we'll actually submit that road test, even though we're going to still assign them to the 14-foot cutaway. And because, so then after that, we have drivers all the time that ask us, hey, I want a promotion. Hey, I want to move up. I want a bigger route. I want a different territory. Or my boxes are just too big. I'm bulking out every day. Can I get a bigger truck? And we look at the accident history. We look at service. We look at all those things because, there's also a service side to being in a big truck. I actually just had this conversation with one of our drivers. Her attendance isn't fantastic and she wants to go into a bigger truck. Well, how does that look when you have, it's easier when I have an 80 stop route sitting than a 200 stop route sitting. So not only is it a driving and safety piece, but it's also a responsibility and a accountability piece. So, but yes, as far as the 10,000 pounds, we will work with them. But because of our route structure, we're very fortunate to be able to move people into those bigger trucks and put our starting people in the smaller trucks.
Now, if you don't have a flex operation, kind of like we do with our trucks, and you only have P1000s, then you have to invest the time in that driver. It might be longer than the training period accounts for, and you might spend an extra week with your manager tied up in a truck with someone in a P1000, but you absolutely have to make sure that driver's safe on the road. So whatever that looks like, it's going to be longer than the training time, then that's what it takes, and that's what you have to do.
Even just the little things as far as like turning radius, the differences between a cargo van, a step van, a small box truck, a big box truck, a Ford versus a Chevy, like literally everything is different. So that training period of just being in a different truck requires additional training, and you have to recognize that. It's not just like, oh well, they could drive a P700, so sure they can drive a P1200. It's longer. It's longer.
Different, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think those are great points because in a perfect world, everyone can drive the biggest truck, and then you can put them in any truck. But I think it's also an important, like exactly what you guys said. Sometimes you just gotta, what vehicle they're driving, and you check with them to see if they're comfortable trying, or you test them on site and see if they can do it. But just forcing every driver that comes in to drive the biggest trucks, if you have a variety of different vehicles, isn't always the best strategy. That could lead to, a lack of confidence or some things that aren't necessary for the vehicles that they will be driving. But if they're capable of it, if the manager notices and pushes them to it, then they pass that road test, then they've got all the flexibility in the world to be in any vehicle that you need them in.
And what are you hiring for, right? Like if you have an in-town P1000 route that's open and no one on your current staff wants to move into it, then you need to hire a different type of driver. You're not hiring a Spark driver or a DoorDasher or an Uber driver to fill that spot, right? You need someone that has big truck experience. So you have to, that's how your ad should read. And the, pay should be commensurate with that as well.
So another question came in. So Tim's asking, I think you guys did mention some of the pre-training that you sometimes do, but is the first real day that a new employee spends with you, is that like employee handbook? Like, what does that first day look like?
So our onboarding process is electronic. Which is through our PEO, but it's a link. They get the link. Obviously, we've already done the interview. We've had the conversation, sometimes met in person. Sometimes they want to ride along. So we screen them as a jumper, bring them in for a day in the life. And then, but the onboarding process for us is a link. So we send them the link that has all of the signatures, the handbook links, the onboarding. We're an open book, slickertrucking.net. Flop around in there, lots of information, but our drivers have access to it. We tell them to go there, order their uniforms, do all the things, learn about us. But so their onboarding is all electronic, direct deposit, payroll, taxes, all that stuff, the handbook. And then when they come to class, they get one of these, which is an onboarding packet for us. And it's got all the information. It's got all their need to knows on one side, benefits and everything at 60 days on the other side, how to order uniforms, how to time keep, any links, anything the job description, a document that says where our handbooks are kept, literally PTO policies, how to get on our timekeeping schedule app, all of those things. It's got an outline of what our pay stub looks like, where to find 401k matching information, where to find all that information. So when they come to class, the first probably half an hour of class is really not about CT or QualCert at all. It's just about us and, kind of getting compliant, getting to know us, how to, find different things, what you should expect from us. Our expectation documents, things like that. So that's kind of where everything's held. And that's why we like to do it during the class, because everybody has to, and it's kind of captive audience, right? You're not just on the dock and, kind of running around.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think that's all we have time for. So thank you guys so much for walking through that. I know that this is something that is top of mind for a lot of people, and if it's not, it should be, who are in the industry, because as we continue to see that this is both an important program and that safety has not diminished. If anything, it only continues to be more important, especially with the things like Express, where it's an even bigger deal. There's all the different types of
Pressures.
pressures that FedEx is putting. So thank you guys so much for being here, for giving your insight, and thanks
Awesome.
everybody else for joining today.
Awesome, guys.
For joining live on YouTube. So see you
Thanks
guys.
so much.